Okay, it's 12:01, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Brad Wingler. I'm one of the investment executives with MGO. Some of you may recognize me because I may work on your plan, but we do have two other investment executives from MGO here with us today, both Justin Petrus and Parker Kaysgen. They both work on other plans, so you may recognize them, or you may work with one of the other investment executives at MGO. Today's presentation is entitled Healthcare Plan for Costs in Retirement. We feel like this is a very timely topic and a topic that has a great deal of interest amongst the participants in our plans. So typically, we try to do at least one webinar every 2 to 3 months. So we try and do about 4 to 6 webinars per year, and we try to stick with topics that we find that participants in the plans that we serve are most interested in. Often it's either me or Justin who delivers the presentations for the webinars that we do. But occasionally we are fortunate enough to have a guest speaker, and today we do have a guest speaker. His name is Dave Harris with Nationwide's Retirement Institute. Some of you that name might sound familiar. Dave was actually a guest speaker on one of our webinars last year. He delivered the Social Security webinar for us last year, which was actually the highest attended webinar that we've had in the entire history of delivering these presentations to plan participants. So Dave is back again today to talk about healthcare costs in retirement. Dave has provided me with a very, very extensive bio, which he has earned every bit of. But I will not read you his entire bio. Dave and I are actually good friends. So those of you who know me may know that I actually worked for Nationwide for 17 years. I was a regional vice president in the retirement plan business for Nationwide for 17 years. So I've known Dave for quite a while. He actually started his career at Nationwide in 1997, which is actually even before me. So he's been there for about 26 years. So we've become very good friends over the years. A couple of things I will say about Dave. Obviously, he's very loyal. He's also one of the founding members of Nationwide's Retirement Institute. So he's been there from the beginning. The Retirement Institute is an organization within Nationwide that I always said it's a thought leadership group. So they're not there to sell any product. Dave doesn't represent any product. He doesn't sell any product. He doesn't represent any specific business line at Nationwide. It's just a group that does thought leadership in certain really important topics. And I would say that the two topics that I hear Dave talk about most often is Social Security and healthcare costs in retirement. Dave he literally speaks to thousands and thousands of financial professionals and participants every year. In fact, he joins us today from Orlando, Florida, which is far, far away from his home in Columbus, where he's actually speaking at a broker-dealer conference later today. So we're very fortunate to have Dave with us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave. One thing I will mention, one just housekeeping item before I turn it over to Dave. If you do have questions, please put them in the question and answer chat, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can. If some of them during the presentation, and most of them probably at the end of the presentation, but we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Brad, thank you very much. Just a quick mic check. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you great.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, thank you so much for taking your time to be on this call. We're going to be talking about healthcare cost and retirement. And before we get started, I just want to give you an idea on how I got into this area of retirement income planning, because I started with Nationwide in '97, but the Nationwide Retirement Institute began in 2007. So like Brad said, I'm one of the founding members. And the reason why I was so passionate and had a big desire to get this job was because I had been working with my parents, Dayton, Ohio. My dad worked for GM for 48 years. My mom was a school teacher for 27 years. And in 1999, my parents decided that they were going to retire. It was a small family. It was my mom, my dad, and myself. They gave me a really good start in life. I wanted to give them a really good start in retirement. I had studied finance. I was licensed to sell financial products with Nationwide at that point in time. And um, over the course of 99, I did a lot of work with my parents, figuring out how we're going to put together their spending plan. I know a lot of people call it a budget, excuse me, but as I look at what we're really doing is we're trying to figure out how we're going to spend your income in retirement. What's most important? What do we have to cover? So we use the term spending plan. We spend a lot of time getting everything together. My parents retire. And right at the very beginning of retirement, we saw some changes in market conditions and long term. So as we go through the presentation today, I'm going to bring them up a couple different times and talk about how some of the changes or some of the risk that we're seeing with healthcare impacted them directly and how things have actually shifted through the years. So at the very beginning of this presentation, I always like to start off with 3 out of 4 people believe that healthcare costs are, just out of control, and it's one of the expenses that we fear the most. And I think that's a really good thing for us to fear because, quite frankly, healthcare is more than a cost during our retirement years. It can also become a risk to the success of your retirement income plan. And as we go through the presentation, I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind that healthcare is more than a cost. It can become a risk. And just like every other risk, we have to manage it. Now, like Brad said, I am not here to talk about any type of products. Nationwide does not even have any kind of products to offer when it comes down to health insurance. We obviously have financial products, but that's not my job. My job today is really solely around covering these 3 areas. We're going to talk about retirement income planning challenges, and we're going to talk about how those are really risk and how we address them. We're going to spend most of our time talking about the basics behind healthcare, so the Medicare system itself. And then we're going to introduce you to a tool that you have access to. There's no charge to use this tool that can help you understand what healthcare costs can look like for you or you and a spouse as you enter into and live through retirement. Now, starting off with the risk or the challenges that we face. My parents invested for years. Like I said, my dad worked for GM for 48 years. And they had really seen a lot of risk. Market loss was something that they were very aware of and had experienced multiple times in their life. Inflation, again, another major thing that they had seen. Healthcare, it's always evolving. And as we see healthcare today, yeah, it can be a challenge. But what my parents really didn't understand, and me back in 99, I didn't really understand, is how those risks before retirement really are much more important when you're living in retirement. So market loss early in my parents' retirement because the tech bubble burst for the stock market in 2000. My parents' first year in retirement, their second year, and really into their third year in retirement, the markets were down. So that meant we had to liquidate more shares of investments to create the income that we needed, which, was a challenge. Inflation, by about 7 years into retirement, inflation became an issue. Healthcare was one that we didn't see coming. My dad, again, with his work with GM, he had benefits that he was going to have until and my mother, who passed last, would have these benefits. But they ended up losing those benefits. In 2007, going into 2008, when GM restructured, my parents lost their medical benefits, and they're not alone. We're seeing trends where more and more people, as they're approaching retirement, were counting on some type of healthcare coverage that is not going to be there for them as they enter into and live through their retirement years. One of the polls that we did and continue to do really from 2010, we do them every couple of years with Harris Polls. is we want to get an idea on people pre-retirement, but close to retirement, what they believe, those people believe pre-retirement, what that very first year in retirement will be when you're looking at your healthcare cost. So just that first year. And what we find is that, and these numbers have stayed pretty consistent through the years since 2010, about 84% of the population underestimate or cannot even estimate what their healthcare costs are going to be in that first year. And that can really become challenging, because when you think about healthcare and you think about, let's just think about next 15 years. For most of us, our healthcare costs are going to be at their lowest now. It doesn't matter if we're in retirement or our working years. Over the next 15 years, I think we can all agree that we're going to see inflation, and that is going to have those numbers going up. So just based off of inflation on your premiums, your copays, your deductibles, we are going to see an increase in cost. But especially during our retirement years, there's a second inflation rate when you're looking at healthcare, and that is the usage. Give you a quick example. When my parents retired in '99, they were on 2 medications, both of them the exact same medications. They had high cholesterol medication, which they took total ownership for, based off of their lifestyle and their eating habits. They took that total ownership. But they were both also on high blood pressure medication, which they blamed me entirely for. And fair enough. But by the time they passed, my dad in 2013, he was on 15 medications. My mom in 2014, she was on 12 medications. My dad had a pacemaker put in and a couple other procedures. My mom had 2 hips and a knee replacement, and then some procedures on her heart. Each one, as they aged with their cardiovascular systems, they had more and more pharmaceuticals that they had to take. So high blood pressure, high cholesterol, then became type 2 diabetes, and then so on. And that expense, when you're looking at long-term, healthcare will become, for most people, a larger and larger and larger portion of your income needs during your retirement years. If you miss that at the very beginning and you get lulled into a false sense of security, healthcare can truly become a risk to your retirement income plan. Now, that's why the basics behind healthcare matter so much. When you're looking at the Medicare system, when you're looking at healthcare, when you're looking at healthcare cost, we have to look at, for over 90% of the population, that Medicare is going to be our primary health insurance that we're going to have. And one of the questions, after doing this presentation well over 1,000 times, one of the very first questions that is asked, and it definitely should be asked, is, do I have to sign up at 65? And the answer there is maybe. And I'm going to explain what I mean here. So when you're looking at signing up for Medicare, there's something called your initial enrollment period. And that is going to be based off of the month you turn 65. So it's going to be the month you turn 65, 3 months before that month, and then 3 months after. So your initial enrollment period is a 7-month window. And when you sign up for all the different parts of Medicare, as long as you sign up for all the parts of Medicare, Medicare will not put you into a situation where they're going to penalize you. And I'll talk more about that here in a second. They cannot make you take a physical. They can't look at your health and charge you more for different conditions. They can't deny you coverage. You sign up for Medicare, especially during this initial enrollment period, for all the parts of Medicare that you want. It's guaranteed, and it's going to be at the lowest cost in your area. If you don't sign up when you should, Medicare reserves the right to deny you parts of Medicare, like a Medigap supplemental plan. They can make you take a physical. They can rate you and charge you more for conditions. And then there's a penalty. And that penalty works out to be about a 10% penalty for every year that you did not sign up but should have. And I'll give you an example here, a couple examples here in just a minute. But the reality is that you should have signed up, you did not sign up. Let's just say the example that I'm going to give you, this is from Atlanta, Georgia. This happened about 7 years ago. I was doing a meeting just like this that was in person. We had a small group of people. We had 10 people in the room, and one lady had fallen victim to not signing up when she should have. And she told her story. She was very healthy, had some healthcare coverage when she was working, retired, chose not to sign up for Medicare, or actually took action to not sign up for Medicare because she was healthy, didn't feel she needed it, waited 5 years to sign up. When she signed up, she has now a 50% penalty on Medicare Part B as in boy, and there's a penalty also for Medicare Part D as in dog. B is for your basic medical insurance, D is for pharmaceutical, and that is for life. So she's paying 50% more than she should for Medicare Part B and D, or D is a little different, but it works out to the penalties can become very costly. The question that should be on many of your minds is what if I'm working, or what if I'm covered through a spouse's employer and I have coverage? Do I still have to sign up for Medicare? Well, the answer, this is where the maybe comes in. Over 90% of plans that are offered by employers to their employees and their spouses, over 90% of the plans qualify to take the place of Medicare. There's a very small portion that do not qualify to take the place of Medicare. There's only one way to know if the plan that you have access to qualifies to take the place of Medicare or does not. And that's to call the insurance company. You call into their customer service line, you give them the information for your policy and ask the question, does this policy qualify to take the place of Medicare? The answer is either yes or no. There is no maybe. If the answer is yes, which over 90% of the time it is, then all you have to do is ask them for a letter. It can either be mailed or emailed, usually emailed, stating that the policy that you have qualifies to take the place of Medicare. And let's just say that you're going to do that for 3 years. So you reach 65, we're just going to say that you're still working. You've called the insurance company. The insurance company says, yes, the insurance that you have from your employer qualifies to take the place of Medicare, and you're going to work until 68. That's your plan. So you know that you're going to be going 3 years past the time that you should have signed up at 65 in Medicare's eyes. You're going to want to get a letter from that insurance company for each one of those 3 years. Just put them back in a file, because when you go to sign up for Medicare, you're going to sign up and they're going to say, okay, well, you're going to have a penalty because you're signing up late. And we may not allow you to purchase into some Medigap plans. What you're going to be able to come back is say, no, I had qualified medical insurance from my employer, and I have the letters to be able to prove that I had that coverage. There was no lapse. You send that to Medicare, then what Medicare will do is, instead of having an initial enrollment period, you have a special enrollment period that works the exact same way. You still have the 7 months to sign up, and there is no physical, there's no problem. You can sign up for every part of Medicare, but having those letters is the difference between having a very easy process of signing up and having that special enrollment period versus not having those letters, but still having qualified insurance and having to go back and prove it for all the years that you waited. Or even worse, like that lady did not have qualified insurance and then signed up and then did fall back to the penalties and also the rating and the denial of parts of Medicare, like I said, with the Medigap supplemental plans. The best thing you can do is take a look at your situation and start to prepare for it. The sooner the better. When we're signing up for Medicare, we're going to have 2 different paths that we can go down. So it doesn't matter if your special enrollment period or your initial enrollment period, you're going to have 2 options when you're signing up for Medicare. Option 1 is that traditional type of Medicare. It's the original parts with Medicare Part A for hospitalization, then Medicare Part B for your basic insurance. That'll cover things like doctor visits and outpatient procedures. So that's original Medicare, but you're going to find with Medicare Part A and B as in boy that there are some leftover costs. Your premiums are fine. We'll talk about those here in a minute, but you're going to have some copays and deductibles. The way that for Medicare Part A and B as in boy, that a portion or all of those copays and deductibles can be covered is going to be with secondary insurance And that is going to be in the form of one of two different paths that you can take, or two different choices you have here. First is group health insurance, GHI. That's what my dad had from GM. He had a plan from GM that was like a Medigap supplemental plan that came in and covered the costs that were left over with Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B, B as in boy. Or you could buy into a Medigap supplemental plan. These plans are identical in their coverage, state to state, county to county across the US. However, the insurance company that offers it and the cost will change county to county across the US. Everything that we've talked about when I talk about Medicare Part A, Medicare Part B as in boy, and the Medigap supplemental plans, these are all controlled by Medicare. Medicare writes the rules for A and B, but they also, if you're an insurance company that wants to sell a Medigap supplemental plan, your insurance has to meet the qualifications that Medicare puts in place. And then the final part of option one is going to be your pharmaceutical coverage. That's going to be things like Medicare Part D for many of us. And that's going to be a part that Medicare has a hand in setting up, but the independent insurance companies will be the ones offering that insurance, and they can really control their cost, their coverage, and availability county to county across the US. And these plans with the Medicare Part D plans, these can and many times will change year over year. We'll talk more about that here in a couple minutes on how we stay on top of it. If you choose option one, you have all the moving parts and pieces, but it provides you some pretty good coverage. Now, there are a few things that are not covered: hearing, vision, and dental. And with those not being covered, that means that that's an additional cost that we have to look at different ways of being able to cover. And even with the Medigap supplemental plan, the hearing, vision, and dental are just not included under option one. I don't know, and I am not trying to sell memberships by any means, but if any of you are a Costco, a Sam's member, BJ's, doesn't matter, any of the big clubs, you're going to find that most of the clubs now have a vision center, and they've had them for years. You're going to find that most of them, and this is relatively newer, but it's still been for years, but it's newer, the hearing centers, usually right next to the vision centers. And I was in one in Chicago when I was traveling to pick up some water, and I saw the hearing center for the first time, and I was like, are you all going to put a dentist office in right next to this? And it was so funny because the lady that was working in the hearing center said, you're talking about Medicare, right? I said, no. Oh, yeah, I am. And she goes, no, we're not putting in a dentist office, but our members have dentists in the areas that they can see with our membership and have discounts. And, you know, so there is some type of coverage for them there. So there are ways that these are going to be covered outside of, you know, the option one. But again, that's something we have to keep in our minds and take into consideration. Option two, we're going to spend a little bit more time on this later in the presentation, but I want you to think of option two as insurance that you're going to buy, and it's all prepackaged, it's all controlled and offered by independent insurance companies. So you're buying managed healthcare. So you have a network of hospitals, doctors, and pharmacies that you're going to be able to go to. And as long as you stay within a network, that network, you have a known cost. Many times you're going to have things like hearing, vision, and dental included. A lot of times, in addition, you're going to have wellness programs like Silver Sneakers and memberships to different athletic clubs or gyms. So people ask usually at this point in time, which of the two is better? And I can honestly tell you, there are reasons for both. And I'll make that a little bit more clear as we're going through the presentation. Last thing I'm going to say on the slide before we start breaking down and getting into option one. If you think about option one, think about that as you can travel anywhere within the US and you're going to stay within network. Option two, since these are managed healthcare and these are offered by independent insurance companies, you may have a very small network. When my parents lost their benefits in Dayton, Ohio, one of the plans that we liked a lot we found only covered 3 counties right around Dayton, Ohio, and didn't come to Columbus. So if they were visiting my wife and I, they would have been out of network. So we ultimately didn't go with that one. Now, there are Advantage plans that offer, you know, the entire United States. There are some Advantage plans that will even give you some international coverage. But a lot of times when you're looking at the Advantage plans, especially when you're looking by cost, many times the cost will be lower, but your ability to travel will also be limited. So those are some things to keep in the back of your minds. Now, as we go through the different parts of option one, I just want you to think about this in two different ways. Number one, we're going to take a look at it from what's covered, and number two, what the cost can be. So when you take a look at Medicare Part A, this is what you have prepaid the premiums for. So think about all those years of working and paying into Medicare. If you have worked and paid in for at least 10 years, you now have Medicare Part A that you can turn on at 65, and you have 0 premiums to have that insurance. Medicare Part A will cover things like inpatient hospitalization, skilled nursing, and home health care for rehabilitation purposes only, not long-term care or assisted living needs, and then hospice for end-of-life comfort. I don't know if you've ever had people tell you that healthcare and retirement is free. When I first started doing this presentation back in 2011, I had people all the time really telling me, no, healthcare and retirement really isn't that expensive. It's really basically free. It all began right here because you prepaid your premiums. You don't have to pay to have Medicare Part A, but when you use Medicare Part A, you are going to have a per occurrence deductible. What that means is that if you go to the hospital, like the last 6 months of my mom's life, so she passed in June of 2014, she had 6 different visits to the hospital for 6 different things. That means 6 different deductibles. This is not an annual deductible. This is per occurrence. If you're admitted to the hospital as an inpatient, the very first 60 days will be covered with your deductible of $1,600. But think about this. The very first $1,600 that is accrued by going and being admitted to the hospital is your responsibility. How quickly do you think you will reach $1,600 going to the hospital? Now, when we do this presentation, especially years ago when we were live, I would hear all kinds of funny answers. My favorite one still to this day is parking lot. But the reality is that you are going to hit that deductible within your first day, just being very realistic. Good coverage, it's covering you for 60 days. Most people don't make it more than 20 days in the hospital. They're discharged and either sent to rehabilitation or home, but there is still going to be a cost, and it is per occurrence. When you take a look at Medicare Part B, that's that basic insurance. This is going to let you go to the doctor because you're sick and you want to get well, or you're well, you want to stay well by getting physicals. It's going to cover things like durable medical equipment, walkers, wheelchairs. Then it's also going to cover outpatient services. What is done today as an outpatient service? The answer is just about everything, almost everything. And I'm going to give you an example here. When my mom had her hips and her knee replaced, now obviously not all at once, but when she had those 3 surgeries done, they were done where she was admitted to the hospital each time for 3 to 4 days. She qualified for nursing home for rehabilitation, then she went home. A buddy of mine who was in his 60s on Medicare right before COVID had a knee replaced, and it didn't go through Medicare Part A where you had the $1,600 deductible. It went through Medicare Part B, and I'm going to talk more about that as we go through this slide. Now, the first question we have to ask when we're looking at Medicare Part B is what is our monthly premium? We have not prepaid the premiums, so there is a monthly charge, but I'm going to tell you right now, it can differ and will differ for different people. Medicare Part B and Medicare Part D. So B as in boy that we're talking about now, D as in dog that we're going to be talking about here in just a minute. They are means tested. If you have the ability, if you have the means to pay more for this insurance, just to have it, you're going to pay more. I'll talk about that more here on the next slide. You're going to have an annual per person deductible. So this is annual, $200 $26 this year. And then you're going to have the co-insurance, the 20% copays. Well, the 20% copays aren't too bad if you're going to the doctor because you're sick, you want to get well, say it's a $100 office visit, you pay 20, Medicare pays 80, you're fine. How expensive is a new knee? Well, I'm going to tell you from my buddy. Funny enough, he's my personal trainer, is really in great shape except for his knees and his back. And unfortunately, he had to go get his knee done, and it ended up being a great thing for him. But when he went in, he knows that this is what I do for a living. I asked him to kind of track the process and tell me how it went for him. So it was done as an outpatient procedure. What qualifies as an outpatient procedure is when you're admitted and discharged within a 24-hour time frame. What he told me was from couch to couch. So leaving his couch and then going through surgery and returning to his couch after was about 12 hours. So now we're looking at an outpatient procedure. 20% of that new knee was his responsibility. The overall bill was right around just a little under $50,000. That's expensive. That new knee. Now, there are ways, and luckily for him, he had a Medigap supplemental plan that really picked up the majority of the cost. But if you have just Medicare Part B as a boy and you're going to get an outpatient procedure done, understand that you could have a 20% copay on whatever that procedure is going to be. And like I was saying earlier, when you think about outpatient procedures, just about everything today can be done as an outpatient procedure. Obviously, there are some things that can't, but back surgery, neck surgery, some even brain surgery are done as outpatient procedures. Key for us, though, right now is what is it going to charge us? What are we going to have to pay on a monthly basis? And I don't know, obviously, everybody on this call, I don't know if you're married. I don't know your situation. I'm married. I have in-laws that I love. They're great people. I've been married 22 years. And I'm going to tell you a story about how I really got to give this same presentation you're seeing a few years ago to my mother and father-in-law after Thanksgiving dinner. So my father-in-law and myself, we're in West Virginia, which is where my wife's entire family is from. We're back seeing the grandparents. Father-in-law and I were driving together. He's driving. We're going to pick up all the food. He's driving along. He said, "Hey, Dave, I'm going to be signing up for Medicare." He had retired early, but he had to sign up for Medicare coming in that year, the next year after Thanksgiving, the following year. And he said, "Hey, I know you're doing a lot of medication or Medicare presentations. Tell me something that you don't think I'll know." I said, "Bill, well, the thing that surprises a lot of people is Medicare is means tested. That means based off of your modified adjusted gross income, the last time you filed your taxes, you could pay anywhere from $164.40 or $164.90 all the way up to $560.50 per person per month just to have Medicare Part B." And again, it's going to be based off the last time you filed your taxes, looking at your modified adjusted gross income, and that's going to be looked at every single year. My father-in-law is driving the car and he's staring at me. And for those of you that know West Virginia, it is not flat and straight. I'm afraid we're going to be going off a cliff. Well, for him, that really sunk in. And so after dinner that night, we're all in a condo. And he said, "Did you bring your work laptop?" I said, "Sure." I got to give this presentation. And what we realized from my mother and father-in-law is when they're married filing jointly, they're going to fall down to that second category. So that $230.80 per person per month. So there's going to be that increase. Not a major increase, but still that's a monthly increase. And that's not going to go away for them because their modified adjusted gross income isn't going to be coming down. Great place to be with the income, but this is an extra charge. But here's what really concerned him. When one of them passes away and you go from filing jointly, that middle column, to the far left-hand side, where you're filing as an individual, you see those dollars come down considerably. And when my father-in-law, who he expects is going to pass first, passes away, my mother-in-law is going to go all the way down to $428.60 per month. So there's going to be a reduction in Social Security, a reduction in pension, the loss of my father-in-law, and also an increase in Medicare Part B. You're going to see here in a minute, Medicare Part D premiums. That is something a lot of times people are not really aware of. So as I'm sitting trying to get my mother and father-in-law to, relax a little bit as going through this, I made a joke that I encourage you not to make to your father-in-law. I said, Bill, all Marilyn would have to do is get remarried. She could pop right back up to that 230/80. And funny enough, he brings it up every year at Thanksgiving still to this day. So it's one of those things. Luckily, I got him to kind of calm down and get, kind of back into this. This can all be managed, but this was a surprise to him. He had done the research. He never found that. We're going to find the same thing with the prescription drugs, with Medicare Part D as in dog. You're going to have what you're going to be paying the insurance company. Because like I said, there's a little control in what's offered through Medicare, but really it all is going to be from an independent insurance company. The independent insurance company is going to determine what the charge for that insurance is going to be, but Medicare is going to also charge you a surcharge based off of your modified adjusted gross income. We're still using the same tables as we did with Medicare Part B as in boy, but you can see as you go down through the columns, you could pay an extra $12.20 per person per month, all the way up to $76.40 per person per month. Again, based off of your modified adjusted gross income. Just one more thing that we have to keep in mind. One of the things that I always want to make sure that people understand is your Medigap supplemental plan. So when you're looking at what's left over as far as your co-pays and deductibles with Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B as in boy, only those two, and you're looking for a way to offset or cover some of those leftover expenses, that's where these Medigap supplemental plans with option 1 can come in and be very handy. You're going to see that Medicare, for some reason, does not like to use numbers. So we have Medicare Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, and then we have Medigap plans. And they start over with A and go to B, and so on, all the way out to N. Now you're going to see two that are different colors, kind of like a sand color, C and F. C as in cat, F as in Frank. Those two plans, you had to have been signed up by 1/1 end of day, 1/1/20. You had to have had those plans turned on by that day to have been grandfathered in. Those plans are no longer available for people to sign up, but the others are fair game. You can sign up for any of them. You can see each one has just little differences. Starting off with like Plan A, you're going to see that that's pretty basic. The monthly cost is going to be, in most areas, the least expensive, but you also have other coverage or areas that are not covered that you're going to have to pay out of pocket for. The best thing to do is just to take a look and figure out which of the plans can make the most sense to you if you're following option 1. Now, for me, when my parents lost their medical benefits, this is what I was looking for right here. I wanted to get a really good idea on what they were going to be spending on a monthly basis and an annual basis, so I could make their spending plan more accurate. I knew what it was for the most part when I had the GM plans. I knew what the premiums were. We get an idea of what the increase was going to be. I knew what my parents' medications were, and I had an idea of what was going to be covered. And we were on top of all that. Losing all of that and having to come to Medicare, having no idea, not only do we have to figure out what insurance to purchase, but we had to figure how that was going to impact their spending plan for 2008. So this information, this is just very basic. We're going to use Medigap Plan G, and we're going to use that one for a reason that I'll talk about here in just a minute. But if you're looking to have all the parts of Medicare and minimize your out-of-pocket with Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B, this is what you would sign up for most people. And this is going to change county to county across the U.S. As far as the cost. This is the national average. Medicare Part A, you prepay the premiums as long as you pay them for 10 years. So you don't have to pay a dime until you use it. Medicare Part B, we see that it could be as low as $164.90, but we also talked about how it could be over $500 per person per month. The national average for a Medicare Part D plan is $68, and then a Medigap Plan G that we're seeing right now, the national average is right about $145. Now, the reason we're talking about Plan G, that's the plan number one that we're seeing utilized the most right now across the US because of what it covers. It really has the most coverage, leaving the least amount of leftover cost for people. So with this, you can get a pretty good idea on what you're going to have to budget for or put into your spending plan for that next year. But here in a second, I'm going to show you how we can do better. Now, I want to compare that to the Medicare Advantage plans for just a minute. The Medicare Advantage plans, I just want to remind you, these are offered by independent insurance companies. They are offered for profit, and that means the cost, the coverage, and the availability will change county to county across the US. So just think about that for a minute. They're going to change literally by county. And not only will they change by county, but these can also change annually in what's even offered. You can have a plan that you had for, let's just say 2023, not offered in 2024. So you're going to have to make another selection. These plans, a lot of times people think that I'm starting to say that option one is better, and I'm not by any means saying that. So I'm going to give you an example of where these plans have actually, I've seen people make some changes. We'll talk about that here in just a second, but I am by no means saying that option two is not a good choice. It definitely can be, but just understand that you have to stay on top of what the coverage is and make sure that it is going to fit your needs. It is that network of hospitals, doctors, and pharmacies. The big question that I get kind of towards this part of the presentation is, can I switch and can I move things around? And the answer there is, in some situations, absolutely. In some situations, maybe. So let me start with what is guaranteed. If you sign up for Medicare Advantage or Medicare, Original Medicare with a Medigap policy and want to go to a Medicare Advantage plan, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10 years down the road, you can do that any year that you want during open enrollment. Open enrollment is the second week of October through the first week of December every year. So you can make that change. And that's going to be the example that I give you here in just a minute. If you have a Medicare Advantage plan and decide you want a different Medicare Advantage plan because maybe the plan that you had didn't give you much coverage and you want to travel the next year, you can make that switch during open enrollment as well, second week of October through the first week of December. But there are going to be some things that you cannot change without having to go to Medicare and asking for permission. If you have Original Medicare, so option one with a Medigap policy, and you want to go from one policy to a different Medigap policy, so you still have Original Medicare, but you want to switch your Medigap policy, you can try that at any time. But Medicare can make you take a physical. They can rate you and charge you more for different conditions that you're battling. They can exclude conditions entirely, and they can deny you that switch. So just keep in mind, if you're going to sign up for a Medigap policy, you're looking for the one that you're going to utilize throughout your retirement years. If you want to go from a Medicare Advantage plan to Original Medicare with a Medigap policy, same things apply. You can be denied the change. You could be rated. You could have to take a physical. You can definitely be charged more. So the idea is you're going to want to sign up, if you're looking to sign up for option one with a Medigap policy, you're going to want to make sure that you're signing up for the Medigap policy from the beginning and you're picking the Medigap plan that is going to make the most sense for you. But I'm going to give you a really cool example. This is a good friend of mine. He's also a teammate. His name's Tim O'Mara, and his parents lived in Ohio. They have 3 kids, 2 in North Carolina, including my friend Tim. His brother is in Boston. Parents are now in their mid-70s. In their early 70s, they decided they wanted to be closer to the grandkids. And North Carolina seemed like a good fit because weather's a little bit easier. Plus, they had 2 of their 3 children there and all the grandkids. So his parents decided they were going to move from Ohio to North Carolina, Charlotte. Well, in Ohio, because they knew that they were going to be traveling quite a bit, when they signed up originally, they signed up for original Medicare with a very solid Medigap policy. And that was what they were using. Because again, they were traveling across the US and they wanted that coverage. However, when they, now being in their mid 70s, are not looking to travel very much, they have 2 of the 3 kids in North Carolina. They went from having a really expensive Medigap policy to switching over to a Medicare Advantage plan because they have 2 great networks that are in Charlotte, and they were able to pick the one that met their needs the best by the doctors that were in network and everything there. So they were actually able to go from an original Medicare with a Medigap policy to going to an Advantage plan, and that actually is going to save them about $300 a month because of the reduction with going to the Advantage plan. So a couple of things I want you to understand. I'm by no means saying one is better than the other. Number one. Number two, Nationwide doesn't sell either of these. So I'm not going to try to encourage you to go either way. What my biggest concern with all of this information is right here. How do we know and address the cost? When you take a look at healthcare, you saw the table that we used with the basic parts of Medicare and what the expense would look like. And I told you we could do better. This is how we do better. We take a look at you. We take a look at your health, your wealth, your gender, your age, where you live, how you live. And we get an idea of what healthcare costs are going to look like for you and a spouse year over year through retirement. In addition, we're going to get an idea on life expectancy, not based off of the year and month you were born, but rather someone just like you, your health, your wealth, your gender, your age, your retirement age, how you live, where you live, all of that's going to be included. What we do is we run this report. Again, there's no charge to use this. And we're going to take the data from you. So this is the data that we look for. And so you can see that, we're looking at age, we're looking at gender assigned at birth. We're looking here at income levels for your modified adjusted gross income. We're looking at your current health. We're taking a look at history for family. And what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to give you an idea year by year, entering into retirement, what you can look for as far as your healthcare cost as an individual or as a part of a married couple. Now, before I kind of break this down, I want you to see on the left-hand side, that's Jim, that's the husband. It goes down and then it stops. Linda, more towards the middle, and the right-hand side continues all the way down. Does anybody want to guess what happened to Jim? Jim's life expectancy ran out. Men typically live less, have less life expectancy than women. It's about 10 years. This is based off of someone like him. Like I said, health, wealth, gender, age, all the stuff that I had mentioned. Is this going to be exact? Absolutely not. There's no way that it's going to be exact. Is it better than just a table in the book? It is for planning purposes. Absolutely. What we're going to be able to do is break out the different parts of Medicare. So like looking at Medicare Part B for your basic insurance, Medicare Part D, pharmaceuticals, a Medigap policy. Usually we use G there, and then additional cost. Additional cost is pharmaceuticals, and also different procedures that you may have need to have as you age based off of your health, your wealth, your gender, age, all of that information that we talked about. Then as we go towards the right-hand side, you're going to see a breakdown total cost for that year. Those are good numbers, and they can really help an idea year over year what the cost is going to look like. What I use the most, though, is the average annual healthcare cost. You're going to see that down at the bottom right-hand side or part of the page. In this case, the slide, it's going to be outlined in red. So what we know is that over this time frame for Jim and Linda, we're looking at about a $17,000 annual cost. Now, for many people, when you see that for the first time, it can be a little off-putting. Well, number one, these are just national numbers. These are not your numbers. So don't take this information and think that's close enough, because it is absolutely not. We run this report based off of a fact finder that I'll show you here in just a minute. But beyond that, you're going to be able to have an idea by looking at year over year what the expenses are. So even though 17,000 is the average, if you would go back to the very first year in 2028 when they're in retirement, the cost is really 11,000. So if you would go all the way up that column to the very top, this can help you have an idea on what that average annual cost is when you're looking at holistically investing for retirement and including this as an income need. But when you're tactically creating the income plan, you're going to use that year by year information. Now, the way we run this report is all based off of a one-page fact finder. And what ends up happening is you fill the information out. It's going to be your name. It's going to be everything after your name is going to either increase or decrease cost and life expectancy. So gender, your current age, retirement age, states. So wherever you're looking at, county to county, we'll break it down to the counties. We'll give you an idea on what that expense is going to be. We're going to take a look at things like your different medical conditions that you may be battling. Now, I'm going to tell you, funny enough, it happened here in Orlando, Florida. I was down doing a series of meetings when we first launched this program. And I was obviously new and green. I knew the topic, but I didn't really know how the audiences were going to see the presentation and then how they're going to fill out the fact finders. And everybody was filling out the fact finders, but I found that it was 5 days in Orlando. The first 2 days, I met the healthiest people I had ever met in my life. And I was wondering why. And the wholesaler, the person from Nationwide that I was traveling with, we realized everybody was lying to us because they thought that we were going to really take a look at this and this was something that was going to charge them more or something. Because now, again, we're not offering products. We're using this to give people guidance on what the expense is going to look like. So the next meeting that we did, when we got to this part of the presentation and people were filling out the forms, I wanted to do a little test. And so I let people fill out the forms all the way down. And then I came back with this. And you know what? You're really going to want to be honest with your health because, quite frankly, if you're making yourself healthier than you really are, your healthcare costs are going to go up because you're going to have a longer life expectancy. And so the numbers aren't really going to look the way they should look. And I was not surprised, but I did chuckle at how many people went back and crossed out different things and answered, honestly, as opposed to pretending that they were in the best health. What I say is that if you're going to fill this out, which I encourage you all to do, fill it out honestly. Give us an idea of what you believe your modified adjusted gross income is going to be, either married filing jointly or as an individual. If you don't know, you can check 2. You can even check 3 different levels. We'll run you 3 different reports, but we'll show you the importance of minimizing modified adjusted gross income in retirement. And then really what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to tell us how much information from the report that you're going to want. And really the top 2 options are the ones that we use pretty much exclusively. The top is going to show the most expenses, but the piece that it's going to have that the second one down will not. It's going to be the out-of-pocket expense, so your pharmaceutical needs and things like that. Now, I know we covered a lot of information today. We talked about healthcare and other risks as something that we have to manage when we're looking to retire and throughout our retirement. We talked about the basics behind the Medicare system, and there's really nothing basic about it. The decisions that we make early on do matter. And then we talked about a tool that you all have access to give yourselves a better idea on what healthcare costs are going to look like for you. And so with working with this team, and like Brad said earlier, Brad and I are friends, have been friends for years. I will follow up with a PDF of all my slides to Brad, along with the fact finder. And Brad, is there any way that you would want to have people ask for the fact finder or anything there?
Yeah, it's great point, Dave. I was actually going to mention that in my closing comments, but so there's a couple of ways. If you know your investment executive, so if you've worked with me and I've met with me in the past, you can email me directly. Same with Justin. But if you're not sure who your investment executive is for your plan, every plan does have one. You can just email us at ask@MGO, and that's Michael George Oscar -inc.com. Just let us know that you'd like a copy of the healthcare assessment tool questionnaire or a copy of the slides, and we'd be happy to. Dave, are the slides that we can send out the slides? Are those okay to be sent out?
Yeah, you can, 100%. So what I sent you earlier, you can send those out.
Okay. So yeah, if you want either one, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to send those out to you. We're coming up on 1 o'clock here. Does anybody have any additional questions before we wrap things up?
I do have a comment from one of the participants here. So Dave, maybe you can address this. They just said there are differences with the amount of treatment sessions that you can have with Medicare versus managed care. Medicare allows the therapist to decide discharge. Managed care makes the determination and is likely much sooner than the person is ready. And that was coming from somebody who is a physical therapist. Could you address that?
Absolutely. And, when you're looking at managed care, so we're talking about the Advantage plans. So I appreciate you bringing that up, the person that asked the question, because I see the same thing. When I talk about Medicare, original Medicare with the Medigap policies, I do see where if there's a need for a hip replacement or a knee replacement, many times it's done a year, maybe even two earlier than with many of the Advantage plans with the managed care, the rehabilitation portion of that. So again, I'm going back. I've seen many different situations, but the one that I've got the most information on is my friend, personal trainer with the knee. He had that type of coverage where it was just something where he was good to go, with the Medigap policy where it was up to the therapist how long he had to go to physical therapy. Many times with the managed care, you're going to see where there are so many allotted, and that's what you get.
That's a great point, Dave. That's great. Very insightful.
That was the only question that I had that I saw here in the Q&A.
If there are additional questions that you want to submit, you can also send those to the MGO email, the ask@mgo-inc, if you're not sure which one of us you work with. It is 12:58, so we're coming up on an hour. We normally like to try to keep these a little shorter, but on a topic like this, obviously there's a lot of information to cover. So Dave does his best to try and cram as much as he can into the hour that we allot for it. So thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. Everybody have a great day. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to follow up with us. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.